Hallo zusammen und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Episode des Digital Download. Oops. Good afternoon, good morning, and good day, wherever you may be joining us from. And welcome to a new edition of the Digital Download, the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. Now globally syndicated on TuneIn Radio through IBGR, the number one business talk, news, and strategy radio network. Today, we're exploring the significant transformation happening in the workplace, marked by what our guests call the silent rebellion. We have two guests today, Inez Odom and Chris Lewis, to help us with the discussion. Inez is VP of Professional Development and Chris Lewis, founder of Team Lewis. Together, they bring a wealth of experience in leadership development, global communications, and understanding of evolving needs of today's professionals. But before we bring Inez and Chris on, let's go around the set and introduce everyone. While we're doing that, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend, ping them, and have them join us? We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience, and audience participation is highly encouraged. Adam, why don't you kick us off?
Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I wonder why you introduced the beginning as your joke in Welsh today. A joke. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversation here. This should be a fascinating delve into an important topic. And welcome everybody, and hello to the team.
Excellent, thank you, Adam. Tracy.
Good morning, everybody. Tracy Borison, founder of TLB Coaching and Events, a proud partner of DLA Ignite. You know what, you guys? It's like 7 a.m. for me, but then I heard it's like 6 a.m. for Inez, so I don't feel like. But I'm kind of tired today. But I'm excited about this hope revolution because I believe it's going to bring energy to all of us. So I have my tea with caffeine in it, and I'm ready to go.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Tim.
Thank you. Yes, welcome everybody. My name's Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. And I'm famous for writing the book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. I was informed also today by my co-partner, Adam, that I'm famous for other things as well. And one of the other things that I'm famous for is basically advertising other people's books.
You are famous for that.
Well done.
So if you didn't know that Inez and Chris have written, this is their latest book, The Silent Rebellion, Becoming a Modern Leader through Kogan Page. So you can get it from koganpage.com or from amazon.com or from good booksellers. Advert over. Tim was holding the book for those people listening on radio.
Excellent. Well, that's said. This is said now. Okay. And myself, Bertrand Godillot, I am the founder and managing partner of Odysseus & Co., a very proud DLA Ignite partner. But as I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Inez Odom and Chris Lewis. Inez' expertise in professional development and Chris' experience in building a global communications agency provide a unique insights into the changing dynamics of leadership. Let's bring them on.
Woo! Welcome.
Thank you very much.
All said.
Hello.
Excellent. Well, Inez, Chris, thank you so much. Chris, maybe and you both actually could start with having you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what led you where you are today. Chris, you want to start?
Sure. Well, thanks, Bertrand, and thank you everybody for the opportunity. Inez and I have been working together for quite some time in a foundation, and this foundation is one of the largest employee-directed foundations in the world. And this works insofar as every colleague in the foundation, every colleague in the company has their own budget, $2,000 or euros or pounds to invest in a cause of their own choice, whether this be a cause of the left, cause of the right, cause of the center. We don't care as long as it's a charity, registered charity. And in so doing, we've now amassed 2,500 causes. And one of the things that stands out amongst these causes is the quality of leadership. And I've written several books on leadership and creativity, as you'd expect from somebody that's founded a business. As you know, self-made men worship their creators. They go off and write books, which everybody they're always endorsed by the International Insomniac Society as being a cure-all. And in this book, we highlighted the brilliant levels of leadership that we were seeing in the third sector. And you'll always find brilliant leadership wherever it's under the most pressure, where the things are under the most pressure. And we saw that everywhere we looked in the third sector. They were people that were achieving enormous amounts of value with very little resources. They weren't the biggest, they weren't making the most money, they weren't employing the biggest number of people, but they were making a significant difference and moving the science and art of leadership forward. And Inez and I discussed this, and we felt somebody should do something to highlight them, because they weren't building a massive rocket and sending themselves or their family into space. They weren't building the biggest or the best, but they were making a significant difference in their community, and they're extremely popular. Inez, I think we discussed quite a few of these before we went to go and interview them, but we picked
11. We have 11 different cause leaders that we featured in the book. And indeed, one of the things that was so inspiring was really recognizing that COVID changed everything. And by meeting these leaders who were trying to manage nonprofits as varied as suicide prevention themes, all the way to how to help disabled athletes or how to help folks who have learning differences, a wide range. What we found was that each of these individuals really brought their heart and soul to the process, and it ended up being, I think, an incredible dimension of the book, because you have an opportunity to really, you see the blueprint for modern leadership, frankly, in their stories.
Excellent. So that leads to the first question. Thank you for that. So the title of this show is The Silent Rebellion, Becoming a Modern Leader. What is the silent rebellion? And why is it happening?
And why is it silent? Woo! So one thing I will share, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really about people that are quietly getting on with it and not looking to be in the limelight, but are ultimately really trying to affect meaningful change and really trying to be leaders who climb the mountain not to be seen, but so that they can see the vista and really help translate what's required. And I think in the best sense, you're seeing these leaders that are bringing hope. You know, certainly in the words of one of my heroes, Desmond Tutu, hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. And I think that is what good modern leadership is doing. It's bringing and engendering hope.
One of the things that I found, I've read the book, and one of the things that I found was your last chapter. And actually, I would bring this up at the end of the interview, but I've never seen the word hope and leadership together. I don't think ever. But what we've seen is, I think, and you pull the threads together about emotional intelligence, purpose, inclusion, and also about hope. So why are you bringing hope and leadership together, and why is nobody else seem to be talking about this?
Well, I think another bit of advice as well on this, which is if you can possibly avoid it, never write a book when your co-author is like Yoda. So she's constantly coming out with very deep and philosophical questions. And when you're just trying to get on write a book, so Yoda can be very frustrating to work with. I mean, very inspirational, very philosophical, but not always as punctual as you'd like when delivering the copy. So nobody's ever chased.
Well, now that there's Baby Yoda, right? There are all sort of iterations of Yoda. So, but please continue.
Well, thank you, Inez. There'll be more profundity along in a minute. It's a silent rebellion. It's interesting to call it a silent rebellion simply because of the fact that it's not actually silent. It is making a noise, but no one's listening. And this is one of the problems of our age, which is nobody's really paying attention. If you get on a British Airways flight, you need a galaxy of actors and stars from Hollywood to tell you how to put your seatbelt on. And people are not paying any attention to them. And so that's one of the reasons we wanted to highlight these people, because they are doing a great deal of work and they are making some noise, but they're not being listened to by people who talk about leadership. And because a lot of those books are written by people who are in the business world, writing about how to make money or how to lie down after a particularly strenuous thought. And so one of the things that we've got to develop here is the capacity to listen to things which make less noise. And they are more rewarding, but may not be as immediately stimulating, because another factor of these great social agents is their modesty. Every time we said we want to feature you in a book on leadership, they said, "Are you sure you've not got the wrong email address?"
Right. A lot of humility among those that we met with. And in many ways, there are some who they were saying, "I'm not a leader. I'm just getting this done." And then, going, well, in fact, you are a leader.
So we were inspired by another great book, which is by Thomas Premuzic, called "Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders?" It's a brilliant book, and I heartily recommend it, simply because of the fact that it talks about the discussion of leadership often being around very confident people. And one of the things that we found so inspiring about the agency that we saw being applied in the third sector was that these people were often not that confident, but they were willing to try. And their vulnerability promoted a great deal of loyalty amongst their team. And that's one of the features of really good leadership, which is that it's not afraid to be vulnerable. And if it is vulnerable, it tends to get a bigger buy-in from its team, rather than the AlphaZilla approach of climbing to the tallest structure in visible sight and gesticulating at everybody from it. This is about serving the community. It's why we talk about servant leadership model quite a bit.
So there's something very soothing about the way that you're positioning this. Less of that rampant machismo and screaming that we hear from so many leaders, but the very nature of this kind of philosophy and mindset and identification of these people means that because they're not hungry for the limelight and hogging the limelight and screaming, as you said, Chris, from the tallest structure and gesticulating at their audience, they have been not exactly overlooked, but they've not been seen. So how do we go about changing that? Because there's a million books out there on leadership, and all of them are saying you need to shout louder and more often and have bigger goals and dreams. And this is saying, and it makes perfect sense, that actually you need to be a person of the people. You need to be like your team, and you need to shepherd them. So how do we bring that to the forefront?
Come on, Inez. You can.
I think.
I'm not going to fall into that trap. He just dug a big hole in front of me, covered it with.
No. I think we
have a go at it.
I've got it. I've got this. All right. I think we create spaces where people have an opportunity to step in and feel welcome. One of the quotes in the book is from a young woman named Jillian Johnson that I have the pleasure of knowing. She was at the time, I think, one of 20 under 20 years old. I mean, she was literally 17 when she made this observation. But what she said was, it's critical to look around and see who's not at the table and bring them to the table if you're in a position to do that. So I think part of it is, how do we make sure that we're extending the parentheses, that not only are we going deep but wide, that we're saying who else needs to be part of this discussion. And I think that's certainly a component. And then another huge component of the book is that we talk about the unexpected roles of the leader. And it's the recognition that for many of us, our first example of leadership were our parents. And how did our parents lead? There are single parent families where that single parent is leading a family and they are in effect a leader. So it's taking some of the traditions of what we've thought of as leadership and really, frankly, reshaping them and remolding them. And so, as we talked about unexpected roles of the leader, everything from being a coach, being a parent, at times you just need to be present and caring and holding space for someone else. You're exhibiting leadership. So it's really, I think it's that fine line of how you can exhibit a quality that amounts to leadership, and you are in fact a leader.
In the words of the great Charles de Gaulle, if you are not sat at the table, you are on the menu. And now,
clearly some experience.
Shout out to another great movie, The Menu. Keep going. Go ahead.
You see what I mean? It's never share a phone box with Yoda. And so this is one of the things that there's a lot of people who are on the menu, and we have got to believe that we are more than crowds or mobs, herds of economic units to be herded to one place to consume or be consumed. People run on things which are not measurable by current management systems. They run on hope, they run on belief, they run on faith, and hope is the currency of modern leadership. And if you're not representing that, then why would they come to the table anyway?
Well, and another powerful point that Chris always makes that bears mentioning: hope is all about the future. You can't hope for the past. Past is done. So when we're thinking about hope, we're by its very nature, we're forward looking.
So I thank you. Brilliant answer. I get that this is it seems to me that this is blindingly obvious, the way that leaders should lead now and in the future, if only by virtue of the fact that the converse of this has got us to the absolute crap that we're in now. We've got massive wealth inequality. We've got people worshipping false idols. How many likes have I got on Instagram, and how much money have I got? And here I am on some famous person's private jet. And people are both as individuals and as employees or team members within an organization are being driven to produce and to have a belief system that creates what will inevitably be poor outcomes, haves and have-nots, people that have a voice, people that don't have a voice. And this seems like a way of injecting wholesomeness into this whole process of leadership, where it isn't the strongest and the most vitriolic that win, but the kindest and the most able to garner true support of the people around them. So how can we move this from being a book that you guys have written into something which becomes a mainstream movement that people start to buy into, where they're not only looking at the bottom line, they're looking at the social and environmental and human impact of their activities as an organization?
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we shouldn't look at the bottom line. We should just understand the provenance of the bottom line. Provenance, the excellent cultures, the profits are just the byproduct of an excellent culture. it's not the other way around. You can have a terrible culture that still produces profits. It's just that it's not sustainable. And when we're looking through this period of time in this recession, probably the most difficult, most unpredictable, one of the darkest times for a lot of people, with all of the fear that's around, then there's no management metric, there's no balanced scorecard, there's no benchmarking which will allow you to look at the amount of hope or the amount of fear that's in your team. And so when we look at this, we have to understand that we live in the real world, and if you're building a company, which we have, and if you're making profits, which we do, and if you're doing that and you're putting it to some use and allowing other people to distribute it through employee directed funding, then you can call that marketing, you can call it philanthropy, you can call it internal comms, you can call it what the hell you like, as long as it's adding value. And this is one of the problems, that when you become large and bureaucratized, everything has to have a label on it, and everything has to have a budget source, and you can't put hope and fear into a budget line. And so this comes down to the modern leadership, where everybody has a to-do list, and I'm sure everybody on this call's got a to-do list, and one day your partner may even allow you to get to the end of that list when they walk out the door, having probably never seen you get to the bottom of the list. And that's partly the problem, is that there's a to-do list, but there's no to-be list. We are so orientated on left brain values, but leadership, inspiration, restlessness, reassurance, those are verbs and descriptions that go with the verb to be. You can't do inspiration. You can be inspirational. You can't do restless. You can be restless. You can't do reassuring. And so this, we're not advocating turning the management systems on their head. We're just asking them to recognize what the provenance of success is and how it becomes sustainable, because we have to manage to where we are. We're after COVID. We're now going into another period of division, and leadership's job is to parenthesize, not just analyze.
And the antidote to fear is fellowship. That's one of the reasons why we have had even the return to the office. I mean, COVID, we were in incredible isolation, physical isolation, literal isolation. You can help fear be less volatile by simply having an opportunity to be in fellowship.
So we've got a reaction from the audience, which comes with a question. In leading through what you call the silent rebellion, how can leaders authentically cultivate hope to unlock the true potential of their teams, while also having the discernment and courage to step away from individuals whose presence may be quietly toxic to that shared vision? Any reactions to that?
Brilliant question.
Brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant question, Mian. Well done. That's an excellent question. And the answer to it is very simple, which is that on the human body, there are 2 ears and 1 mouth, usually. And leaders would just, if they could work out that's the ratio in which they're supposed to be used. I mean, there is actually a rather semantic debate about people with more than the average number of ears, which includes all of us on this call, actually, because Inez and I have discussed this quite a bit, that the average number of ears is 1.99999. So technically speaking, in management parlance, we have more than the average number of ears. My point is simply that they should be used in proportion to the mouth, which is all you got to do is listen. So if you really want to cultivate this rebellion, you have to listen to that. And it sounds to me, and that a lot of what you're experiencing is you're already aware that it's pretty toxic. And I think you may have asked the question earlier on, which is also, what do I do if I'm trapped in a toxic culture? And how do I get the courage? The answer is listen to yourself first and foremost. And if that little voice inside your head tells you that you're in a toxic culture, then it's telling you to leave. So you should obey that and leave.
Well, and because also when you think about it, it's sort of like being in a toxic work culture is like staying in a toxic marriage or a toxic love relationship. Ultimately, there are 8 billion people on the planet. The number is growing. Find someone else, ultimately, or make your own. But there's no reason to stay in something that is ultimately going to not serve you. And in fact, take your gifts and talents and either develop your own or find a place where those gifts and talents will be appreciated.
Inez, did we come into the wrong show? This is the marriage guidance counselling show.
Oh, sorry. That's right. This is the marriage episode. Exactly. This is the,
we do everything on this show.
I think it's the How to Train Your Dragon edition. I don't know.
We've got another question for you both. Should a team culture, should a team culture, a sense of togetherness, come before a focus on profit and business growth? I think you partially answered to that question, Chris, but maybe restate.
Go for it, Chris.
Brilliant question from Louis as well. Another really excellent question. And the two is not either or. They go together. They walk hand in hand like star-crossed lovers across a misty, dewy field. Profits and culture in love with each other always and forever. You don't
relationship show.
It is a relationship show. It is. This is what comes from writing a book with Yoda. I tell you, it's you just end up with hope in your soul.
Connected to the Force.
Connected to the Force. Well done. Well, but in all seriousness, you also, culture doesn't just happen. Culture in an organization should be curated. It should be supported. You think about things like, how are people sitting? Where are they having their lunch? Are they together? Do they feel included? Are you creating opportunities for fellowship? Are you tending to people's sort of the depths of who they are in every way? Because we bring our whole selves to the workplace, and in some cases, whether we want to or not. I mean, that the person that's showing up to get their job done may have been up all night with a sick child or a sick parent or what have you. So ultimately, it's really being able to create a workplace culture where people feel seen, heard, and supported.
I think this is a really interesting point here because we have lots of management metrics and we have a lot of certainty in senior management and boardrooms, a lot of certainty. And the only provenance of that type of certainty, unfortunately, must be mediocrity, because we live in an age where you can't be certain about anything. And so if you're leading a group of people, one of the things to be able to demonstrate to them is that you've got a range of outcomes that you've planned for, contingencies. And this is why it's quite interesting when you read Thomas Premyslik's book and you also listen to Inez talking about planning for a range of contingencies, is that leadership does tend to be rather focused on one outcome. And there's a good way of illustrating this, which is if you look at the contents of the average female handbag, you'll see that it's 43 items. 43 items is the average content. And with working mothers, which is the majority of our demographic, there's even more. It usually has a 3-stage ladder, a dinner for 7 plus a Volkswagen Beetle in there. And so they're planning for all sorts of things that could go wrong during the day. And that's why it's the greatest argument for diversity in the boardroom, which is not just a matter of social justice. It's actually a matter of business efficiency. If you've got more people worrying about different outcomes, then you can plan and lay contingencies for those outcomes. So somebody asked the question in 2008 for the GFC, why did nobody see it coming? Was the boardroom short of data? Was it short of experience? Was it short of training? Was it short of power? It was short of imagination. And with the pandemic, we didn't have the imagination to see that. Now, this is one of the key things that we talk about in the book, which is that a lot of the third sector organizations, they have to live with this imagination for what could go wrong. And so leadership is not just about the presence of the positive, it's about the absence of the negative as well.
And to that point, if I could add on that, one of the things we discuss in the book, the whole Oscar model of coaching, where you start with your outcome, but then you say, well, what's the situation that I'm in? What are my choices? what are the actions I can take, and ultimately, how do I review that process? And to some extent, just as Chris was talking about, multiple outcomes. I mean, who among us hopefully doesn't have various contingency plans for how you're going to handle any situation? But what's great about the Oscar model is that you can be quite analytical. You can take, we want to increase output at our organization by 30% within the next month, et cetera. And you can apply that model in a way that's efficient, that's thoughtful, that's structured, and ultimately help problem solve for yourself.
I'm just sitting here being like, yep, I agree with everything you guys are saying. And like, what I feel like here, even in this concept of like, imagination is what we're lacking. How can we turn on creativity? I think there is, when we look at it as if like we have to have profit or culture, there's like an underlying scarcity mindset that exists there, right? Because we don't then put ourselves into the zone of imagination and creativity to say like, I want to have this, and this is who we are, and this is how we live our values, and this is how we believe in standing for that, and we want to make a profit, right? I think so. Something that's really interesting for me, I'm on a volunteer board, and the organization, from the time I was introduced to the executive director to now, which is about 7 years, has gone from a $60,000 a year charity to a $1.6 million a year charity. Now they are doing public service with those things, with the money, right? But like when you look at that from a quote unquote revenue generation perspective, any business in the startup ecosystem would love to be able to make that amount of transformation in 7 years. Mm-hmm. And when we have this connection to our why, this passion, and we believe that there's the possibility for this to exist and for money to flow and for people to get helped and for all of these dots to be connected, it allows us to tap into that abundant mindset that I think is so crucial for that imagination, that creativity. And I think a lot of times in business, corporate, however you want to define that, we aren't being creative, because if we were really honest with ourselves, we've only chosen one important thing. The profit is the only important thing. We haven't chosen another important thing. We haven't chosen that our employee experience is important. We haven't chosen that taking a stand for filling the gap we originally saw was important. And therefore, we'll never be as creative as the next guy, because we're not looking at it from as big a picture.
I think
it's not really a question, but just an observation.
Well, no, Tracy, I think your observation is spot on, because what you're really talking about is purpose, right? And with the Team Lewis Foundation, that is exactly what we've done, which is that each individual who's working at Team Lewis is given a sum of money to donate to the local charity of their choice. Through that very action, we are affirming what they believe to be purposeful, and ultimately that makes us a richer community of people in which to operate, because we're able to honor and find out more about all of the need that's out there, and to see ways to really support these different very important charities and what they're doing.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We also use the financial incentive, because every time somebody directs the money to a charity, we give them the same amount in bonus as well to encourage them to do it again. But what's interesting is that sometimes they take that bonus and they double up what they've given to the cause. And so that leaves them in the same situation as a lot of philanthropists that want to play Solomon. And this is the thing, that of all of the things that leadership can be, it's not there to play Solomon. It's there to convene. It's there to bring people together. And so if there's a lot of leaders out there that will be working out how they can be the smartest person in the room, and the best advice I can give them is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
You're in the wrong room.
Yeah, go to another room. Exactly.
This is why I hang out in this room, by the way.
I think saying leadership's job is to make everybody else feel like they're the smartest person in the room. That's the idea about it. Leaders speak last. Leaders eat last. It's a principle that should be there. The leadership should be pushing other people forward, because a lot of the stuff that you can't measure is the stuff that people assess leadership on. And if you want any example of that, ask people how they would describe their parents. And chances are they'll only come back with words to describe their parents, which will go with the verb to be, and will describe them as leaders, as in their leadership model. Even if you say, my father was a pain in the ass, then it's still something you can't do. You have to be it.
Right.
So you talk in the book about that leaders need to be entertainers, therapists, politicians, parents, judges, coaches. How first and foremost, they're all things that you can't measure.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is, how can you be all those things?
Well, you have to wear very large clothing.
Well, I think actually I'm just gonna because my brain ties back into this concept of the abundance versus scarcity, right? If our brain says I can't be all those things, then I can't be all of those things. But for people who are in the practice of being all those things, they realize that there's this situation and it calls for me to be a politician, and there's this situation and it calls for me to be a coach, and there's this situation where it calls for me to be a parent, and I have that permeability to be able to move. But also all of those things really from an underlying point of view have empathy and caring at the heart of them, and observation, right? Observation of what does this situation call for. And
Tracy, you said it perfectly. You used the P word, permeability. I'll use another P word, which is pivot. I think that good leaders know how to pivot in the moment, and it recognizes this may be the moment when I need to be pulling on other skills that I have. And so it's literally meant to be ways in which we need to be thinking how we can tactically lead the group best.
Yeah, I think we've also got to talk about the whole person here, because the whole person comes to the organization, and the whole person can do amazing things. So, I mean, I'm sure there's some parents on this call, and there will have been times when you have been disciplinarian. There will be times when you've been coached. There'll be times when you have been stubborn and dogmatic. You have told
entertaining.
I've actually never mastered that one. So one of the things I would strongly suggest is that there's a full spectrum of skills in the standard human software version 1. It comes with all sorts of abilities, and the tragic system in our education is that because of standardized testing, GMAT and SAT scores and things like that, we've only learned to measure one side of it and correlate that with success, and that there's a right answer and it's the back of the book, and please don't look. There's more than one right answer, and sometimes a sense of humor, for instance, is something you should take very seriously, and because it indicates judgment, timing, in terms of reference, how relaxed somebody's going to be, how they can defuse a situation. Sense of humor is something that should be taken really seriously, but on no GMAT score or SATs test that I've ever seen as it asks them to make a joke.
Tell a joke.
Yeah.
I love my 7-year-old's jokes, by the way. Also, he explains them all the time, which is doubly entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great
funny
jokes
because of this.
Why do so many leaders have bald heads? Because they're always going, "Oh my God."
Look how many leaders we have on our call today, folks.
How many good leaders we have. Highly good leaders, very conscientious.
So question. So assuming I understand all of this, and I feel like I want to move as a leader, I want to change. What are the key strategies that I should be? Is there a cookbook? Or is it just left with me and my my experimentations in that direction?
No, I think, one of the interesting questions to ask somebody, particularly in the area of creative provenance, is where are you and what are you doing when you get hit with your epiphanies, with your best ideas? The Damascene moment where the bush burns into flames and a big voice comes out of it. If that's happening, by the way, that's not for this session, it's probably for another session. If you get those great moments of inspiration, if you ask people about that, they normally come back with three things. They come back with, I'm not in the office, I'm not with anybody else, I'm often on my own. And then they say something really interesting, which is, I wasn't even trying. And this tells you that the most powerful motivating moments come from within people, provided they're prepared to embrace a bit of solitude, switch everything off, and wait for the inner voice to pop up and say, do you know what, you should do this. And that is an untapped resource. And in 30 years of asking the question from a creative point of view, there are many people who will tell you different things about where the moment happens. Sometimes it's in the bathroom, sometimes it's in the gym, sometimes it's walking the dog, sometimes it's driving the car, sometimes it's waking up in the morning, sometimes it's last thing at night. But nobody ever describes a situation where I don't have any good ideas.
Mm-hmm. And Bertrand, based on what you said, one of the things that really comes up is this notion of competence follows preference. We get good at what we like doing. And so in many ways, if someone is trying to cultivate their leadership, they should be reading books, they should be listening to podcasts, they should be looking at those people whose leadership styles they admire, and frankly, deconstructing it. What is it about that individual that I find, effective, what have you, and then ideally adopting those things and discarding what doesn't seem to work.
It's so funny because I'm pretty sure I've used the exact same example. So I'm a marketer and I use that same example in marketing, right? Like if I could tell you to go be on Instagram, but if you don't like being on Instagram, your confidence is never going to be the way if you like having conversations with people in person and you go find ways to have conversations with people in person. I think there's all of these things are just so foundational for our ways of being as humans. And whether you're trying to manifest that in a leadership capacity or a marketing capacity or a social selling capacity or a parenting capacity, we have parents in the audience, right? It doesn't really matter. The practice is the same. And if we can tap into the fact that hey, maybe I feel like I am doing this really confidently from a parenting point of view. Okay, well, how am I interpreting my leadership role as different than that, right? Where can I find the similarities and start to build that confidence on the things that are related to what I would do?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have a great question from the audience, I think. Do you have tips for leading when the leadership above you might not be best? I think that talks to a lot.
Yeah.
That sounds like somebody from my own organization. I did pay them a lot not to ask those sorts of questions.
I set my AI up earlier to send that one in, Chris. Just anyway.
Yeah, thanks for that. We'll talk afterwards. Okay. When leadership above you, don't forget that leadership is not something that just comes from the top. Leadership can happen at any level. Some of the best leaders that I've ever seen have actually been operating at quite low levels in the organization. You can tell a lot when you go into an organization of how you're treated when you arrive in reception, for instance. There's lots of demonstrations of leadership. You can demonstrate leadership absolutely everywhere. And so sometimes just because they're at the top of the organization, it doesn't mean to say they're the leaders. In my experience, the leaders of the culture are elsewhere. The people you have at the top of an organization are often there or should be there because they've got experience and knowledge and trust but that doesn't necessarily make them social leaders. A lot of the social leaders are very active and tucked away elsewhere in the organization. So in answer to that question is that if the leadership above you might not be the best, be your best anyway. Do it anyway. And if they don't notice, then other leaders will notice you and probably either take you out of that organization or they'll raise you up, in the words of the great Billy Graham. Come on, Inez, I've teed that up for you.
I know you teed me up, but I want to go somewhere else, which is that also, if in fact you feel that the leadership above you is not the best or doesn't support you in the way that you would like, part of what your responsibility is to really, I think, create a dialogue where you determine if you've got someone that you're reporting to that you're struggling with the structure, find out. Oftentimes the reason we have challenges really center around expectations and communication. So make sure that you're finding out what are the ways in which maybe this person wants to receive communication. How do you work with them? How do you make sure that you're meeting them where they are? And similarly, if there are things that you feel you need to be more successful, making sure you're translating and or sharing that with them as well.
Do you know what? I've changed my mind about Inez. I think she's all right after all. Do you know what? That's a really important point, that, because sometimes trying to get to leaders is about a question of finding their channel.
Finding the right channel.
Find the channel. Sometimes you can get them, they might go down the pub, they might be on email rather than Zoom, or there might not be on Instagram. There might be a moment where you can just tap into them. But one of the things that I've never ever seen happen, and this speaks to the remote cultures, I've never seen anybody in a structure pop up on Zoom and just drop in on you. If you happen to be in the office in the same space, you'll get more people being opportunistic and dropping in on you. I've never seen that happen on Zoom. There's no spontaneity.
Well, and just one last point, which is, we talk about this notion that, assumption is the leading indicator of complacency. A lot of times we just assume, as opposed to, well, let me find out why this sort of leadership sort of structure that I'm in isn't working for me. Well, don't be complacent. Unpack it, figure it out, work it.
So I was going to say, following on from Tracy's comment about, I'm not comfortable on Instagram, and your comment about the different channels and finding people, and then this kind of spontaneity. So we obviously work in the digital space. Everybody in the world is now like hyper connected together, and we've all got, so there is now more than there has ever been the opportunity for me to see into the life of these inspirational leaders. However, they have to be present in this digital space to enable me to get close to them. And whilst nowadays with remote working and distributed working and multiple sites and all of that, what we haven't got is quite the same opportunity that we would have had 20 years ago to just drop in and, open door policy, or I'll pop in and see Chris because I'm walking past his office. Actually, we don't really get that, but we do get the opportunity to engage with these people one-to-one, irrespective of where they are and when they are, different time zones and all of that. So how can these inspirational modern leaders make use of this? And indeed, how should they?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And ultimately, we were having a discussion over lunch as we were sitting in the office yesterday, a group of us in the San Diego, U.S. headquarters of Team Lewis. And we recognized that being in fellowship is so important. But to your point, how do you have that kind of authentic drop-in moment, or that authentic way to sort of find someone if you're finding them so sort of through social media? At the end of the day, that was exactly why we wrote the book, because in the book, these are people that the various leaders that we highlight are not people whose stories you would normally find on Instagram or who are somehow accessible in some other way. So by creating what we called a living book. The book is replete with QR codes because we also realize that sadly we live in an age where people don't read as much. So what we really wanted to do was figure out ways to take these stories and allow people to engage literally on through various media, videos, podcasts, etc., to get access to the inner workings of who these individuals are and having them tell their own story. So my advice is that if there is, because the people who are out there being highly conspicuous as leaders may not be the ones you want to emulate.
Absolutely.
Yet if you find someone who is a leader that you admire, or we now live in an age where you can direct message them and they might just message you back. And so I think it's a matter of using channels like LinkedIn, etc., to get to those people that you admire and to say, I admire you. Might I have 30 minutes of your time on Zoom? Nothing.
Exactly right. And actually, you can spend a lot of time trying to increase the surface area of contact digitally. But to be honest, of all the people I've ever worked with, the last thing they want to do is increase the surface area of contact with authority. That's the last thing they want to do. It's really not. They're not thinking, how can I spend more time with the people that lead the organization? What our principle is that if you encourage them to talk to other leaders, and those other leaders, they can draw water from any well. We don't care where they draw leadership skills from. In fact, there are better examples of leadership in the third sector that they might find more interesting. And particularly the younger you get in the structures, the more you find cause being central to what they're interested in. And so this is one of those things where you don't have to come to me for the source of the light. The light is all around you. There's 1,000 candle points in the darkness. And I don't care which one of those you go to, as long as you're drawn to those, because it is dark out there. And there's a lot of people who are cursing the dark. And that our message is there's also a lot of people that are lighting the candle. So, don't curse the dark, light the candle.
Brilliant.
Exactly.
Excellent. This is far too short. I'm sure we can have gone for another hour, but we've got to call it an end. Unfortunately, Chris, Inez, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was really great. Where can we learn more? How can we get in touch with you?
Well, Inez is appearing in the next Star Wars.
Exactly. Yeah. Yoda rocks a scarf is the title, but
Yeah, and I've been booked for the whole summer season by the British Insomnia Society for a reason that they won't tell me. So I'm doing the entire season there as a redcoat at the Insomnia Away Day group there. So,
yes. Or one can go to Amazon and buy the book, The Silent Rebellion: Becoming a Modern Leader, or follow the Team Lewis Foundation on Instagram, or you can also just check us out at teamlewis.com for all those good things too.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get the show insights, highlights, and beyond the show insights. And reminders, of course, of upcoming episodes. You may scan the QR code on screen or visit us at digitaldownload.live/newsletter. On behalf of the panelists who are guests today and to our audience, very participated on the audience today. Thank you all, and see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Chris and Inez.